My name is Medhat Al-Masri. Today I'm going to give you an introduction on how to set up your environment for PHP, and we'll do some very basic coding with that. So the first step really is to download PHP. So the place to get it is php.net, and you can go straight to the downloads page, downloads.php. And in the case of Windows, you want to choose Windows Downloads. So I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to download the zip file. If you're setting this up on a server, you probably want to download the installer, and you can find the installer somewhere here, but I'm more interested in the zip file. You can even use the zip file for servers. If you're on a Mac, you want to get the Mac version. If you're on Linux, you want to get the Linux version. It's a little bit big, not too big, 21 megs. Considering other kinds of software, it's not really a very big piece of software. Of course, while it's downloading, I'll just tell you a few things about PHP. It's the most used server-side technology. Some of the big players like Facebook and even WordPress, their platforms are totally built on PHP. And it is an object-oriented language. It's similar to C and Java, and it runs under Linux, Mac, and Windows. The Linux version is called LAMP, L-A-M-P, and LAMP stands for Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP. And the Mac family of apps that you would use if you want to develop is called MAMP, and that's Mac, Apache, MySQL, and PHP. And the Windows family is called WAMP, which is Windows, Apache, MySQL, and PHP. This combination of software is really very, very common, that when you're building apps in PHP, you use MySQL, you use Apache, and of course, you need an operating system. Let's get started. So we've downloaded the software, the zip file. In Windows, I normally look at the properties of a zip file and I click on the unblock checkbox here. And this is because if a piece of file is being downloaded from a website that Microsoft does not consider to be part of your domain, it immediately flags it as malicious. So we're going to tell Windows that no, this is reliable, and we unblock it. The next thing is take the contents of this file, and we're going to create a folder somewhere on our system. I normally put it in the root of one of the drives, and I just call it PHP. Now I'll take the contents of that zip file and paste it all here. Okay. Now PHP in Windows, its most important file is this php.exe. In fact, that's also a web server. So let's do this. Let's create another folder. First of all, let's grab this directory. Actually, it's easy to find. I'm going to go under one of my file folders here, maybe create a new folder. Here, new folder, and I'll just call it, let's say, work. And in that folder, I can create a batch file in the case of Windows so that I can start this thing without too much trouble. I'm I'm going to call it start php.cmd. This is to start the web server. If you're doing this in production, you probably want to connect your PHP to something like an Apache or IIS, but this is for development purposes. I'm going to edit this, and if you remember, my PHP was installed in the PHP folder, and the main file is php.exe. The web server can be called by putting the switch -s and giving it a port number, local host, not only a port number but name. Actually, I like 8888 because it's easier to type, and that's it. We can start web server using this name, localhost, and port 8888. So let me go into this directory by typing cmd. Do it again, cmd, and hit enter here to take me. It should take me into a DOS command terminal, and I can just type start PHP. You can see here that I've got a web server that's listening on port 8888. Let me open a browser here and go to port 8888. There's nothing there because I didn't put anything there. But let's see what happens. Local host 8888. And it doesn't find anything. At least something shows up, so we know something is happening. I'll go back into that folder, and I'm going to show you what is the classic test for determining whether your PHP is running properly or not. So you create a new text file here, and you can call it whatever you like. I'll call it test.php. Test.php. Now, every PHP page needs to have the extension .php. I'm going to edit this, and in here I'm going to put my first PHP command. Now, every PHP tag, it starts with less than $PHP, and you can put all kinds of commands in between these. So you close it this way. You open the tag like that with a less than $PHP, and you close it with a greater than. And here you can put anything you want. The classic way of testing if your PHP is working is to put the command php info and if you like, you can put a semicolon, because all PHP commands, they terminate with a semicolon. So let's save. Now, if I come here and I go /test.php and hit enter, you will see this page. Now, what does this tell us? This basically tells us the configuration of your PHP. It tells you all these settings, display errors on, for example. Now, what does this mean? Well, in this particular case, this setting means that if there are any errors, it will display the errors. Let's find out if this is true. So display errors is on. Let's go back into our editor and do something that doesn't make sense. Like, now what I'll do is, I'll do something wrong. I'll change this perhaps to 0 and click on save. And now if I refresh this, comes up with a message saying the requested resource was not found. Oh, that's because I don't have test.php. Now it comes up with an error saying uncaught error, called to undefined function PHP info thrown blah blah blah. That's the reason for that. It's because it doesn't recognize PHP info 0. So these are the sort of errors that you would get, and it would tell you what line number it's on. So it's really up to you to go in there and fix it. So let's make this work again. So I'm going to remove the 0 and go save. Okay, so now this works again. There are some IDEs that you can use with PHP. Up to now, I've been using Notepad++, but there's something better that you can use than this. And I recommend two possible IDEs. Actually, there's more than that. You can use NetBeans if you want to. You can use Eclipse. There's even something called PHP Storm, which is probably the most preferred IDE to use with PHP. However, I'm going to use Visual Studio Code and brackets. I recommend brackets as well. So where do you get Visual Studio Code? You go to www.visualstudio.com, and when you get here, you have 3 things that you can download. Visual Studio Code is this one here, and it's entirely free. Visual Studio Code is not a very sophisticated IDE, but it's good because it's somewhat lightweight. So I've already installed Visual Studio Code on my machine, so I'm not going to download and install it. What I'll do is I'll show you how to use it. If you go in the folder where we have our PHP, you can come here and right click on the parent folder or the containing folder and say open with code. That's one way of starting it. And then it will open for you the folder with the apps that you have in there. Another thing I recommend also in Visual Studio Code is you can check this autosave. That means that whenever you make a change to any of the files, it just saves it automatically and you don't have to always remember to click on save. It saves some time itself. Let's exit from here and let's go back into that folder. This is my work folder. So I showed you how to open that folder in Visual Studio Code by right-clicking on it and choosing Open with Code. Another way you can do that is if you happen to be in the command prompt at that location. So let's say I go into command prompt at that location. I can type in code dot. Okay, and it will open for me Visual Studio Code in that folder. So it ends up with the same thing. There's another editor that's also recommended. It's called Brackets. So let's search for download Brackets. Here it is. Download Brackets. Brackets.io. So probably this is the official. It is the official site. So let me download Brackets here. And this comes with an installer for Windows. By the way, this is an open source project, so is Visual Studio Code. Both of them are open source, both of them are free. This one has been around longer than Visual Studio Code, and it used to be owned by Adobe. And in a way, they actually control it still. So let's install this. I hadn't installed it before on my machine. So there we go. And for all intents and purposes, I can close code, and let's work with brackets. And I'm going to also close the server here. Let's wait until this installs. We will then actually carry out a few examples of how we can create a form using PHP and post it to a PHP server-side page that processes that form. And that's really the most important thing that I want to communicate today. So at this point, we probably have brackets. Let's search for it. Brackets, here it is. I'm going to say, okay, allow access. And let's see, this is it. This is my brackets. I can open a particular folder here. So let me open the folder that I had my stuff in. It was under my PC, D, trash, and I think I had a folder called work here. Here it is, select folder. So when I select folder, sure enough, it shows me the two files that I have in there. I have start php.cmd and test.php. So let me open this test.php and see that it opens the same code that I had before. Now you can click on the Thunderbolt here. Notice that at the very bottom of the page, it detected the fact that I'm dealing with PHP. If you click on this arrow, you'll see the different languages that brackets knows how to work with. So let me click on the Thunderbolt, which is up here on the top right hand side, and it says live preview connects brackets to your browser. It launches a preview of your HTML page in the browser. So let's click on OK here, live preview base URL, and I'm going to say it's going to be http://localhost and 8888. Of course, I haven't started this yet. So I need to go, I actually closed it before. Let me go back in here into this folder in CMD and run my start php.cmd command so that it starts from the server. So here it is, the server has started. So now over here, if I say live preview base URL is localhost 8888, done. So now it went in there and it found for me the web server and it started my page. Now, what's nice about this is that my browser and my PHP are actually connected. So just to show you that whenever you make a change, brackets in your code, and you save it, the browser automatically updates. And this is a link between brackets and the browser. So let me say, for example, hello PHP here. And I save this. If I go back to my browser, it adds hello PHP without me having to refresh my browser. It just updates automatically, or it refreshes automatically. So this is nice. So let's do something that's more interesting. Okay, so let's create our first PHP file. So up here, I'm going to say file, let me see here, right click and new file. So I'm going to call this my index index.php. Font is very small, so let me just show you what I did. I created index.php and it really has nothing at this point. This is my first PHP page, so I'll give it a header, h2, and say my first PHP page. And I always start with PHP. And I end it with this markup. In the middle, what I'm going to say is I'm going to declare a variable. And in PHP, the way you declare a variable is you go $, you give it a name like me equals to Fred Jones, for example. And the echo command is going to just display it to the output stream. So I'm going to say echo I am, and I can inject that variable in a string. I can say I am, and it's going to display Fred Jones in that position because I put in the variable me, and this is my first PHP page. Okay, so this is what I wrote. So I've got a variable Fred Jones, and I'm going to echo I am, and it's going to replace me with Fred Jones, and this is my first page. So let's try this. So if I go now and I click on the Thunderbolt, it's going to open this page. It will process it and open it in a browser. So if you click now on the Thunderbolt and go to the browser, you should see the code that you've written. Let's look at view source here. And notice that in your view source, you don't see any of those PHP commands like $me and echo and so on, because all the PHP commands are server-side code, and they're just for the eyes of the developer. But the clients or your audience, they just see HTML. Now, in PHP, there are some very important auto-global variables. And what do I mean by auto-global? So I'm going to open up Notepad here. And as far as forms are concerned, there are two very important auto-globals, and they are $_get and $_post. Now, these auto-globals are essentially arrays that are available at the server side, and the get auto-global captures all the items of data that are passed from a form on the client side using the get method. And $_post is the array that captures all the data that's transmitted from the client using the post method. For example, if a user entered data in the, let's say, first name field on a form, then that data is accessible. If it was entered using the post method, it would be accessible using this variable. And names here matter and the cases matter. The form on the client side should look like something like this. Input, perhaps type equals to text, and the name should match exactly this name, first name. Because if the case is different, you will see that on the server side won't be able to find it. So if this happened to be like first name with a big F, and you're trying to access it with first name with a small f, it won't be found on the server side. Let's test this out. Okay, let's create a form that looks like this. So I'm going to go back to my brackets here and add a new file, and let me call it, say, let's say contact info.php. Okay, so this is what I named it, contact info.php. In that file, I'm going to create a form. Now let's make this official and put in the regular tags like HTML tag, and the body tag, the head tag, and let's put a title here. And let's say my form and a body tag. And in here, let's create a div. And in here, I'll create a form. Now, this form will be using the method of post. And the action will be a page, say, process.php. So this is going to process the page, the backend. I don't have that page, so let me remember to actually create it before I forget. So we must have something, file called process.php backend. So backend contact info. In that form, I'm going to sort of display first name, colon, and I'll put an input tag here. I think I had one that I can copy from here. I actually, instead of having to type it, let's copy this and put it here. So let me remember to make this lowercase, or keep it as uppercase, but capture it in the proper case backend. And let's put a break here. And let's say last name, and copy this again. And this time, let's make it last name, A, and put a break as well. And finally, I need a button. I can say input type equals to submit. Okay, now I have my form. When I run this, it should look like this. This is expected, right? Now, in here, this page actually, even though I called it with the extension PHP, in reality it has no any PHP. It does not have any PHP at all. There's nothing here that's PHP. So potentially I can actually rename this file and just make it contactinfo.html if I want to, because it doesn't really matter. There is no PHP in here. But there must be some PHP in process.php, because process.php is going to need some PHP code in order to receive the data at the backend. So let's go back here and change process.php. And in process.php, it's very simple. You put in some PHP code. And here, I'm going to just display the data that has been received from client. So I can say, for example, echo, and I'm going to create a paragraph and say the user entered, and close the paragraph. and I'll echo again what the user has entered. Echo, and I'll say paragraph, open paragraph, and say first name, and I'm going to concatenate this string with the data that has been received, and that goes into the global because it goes into the post global, because on the client side I'm using here the post method. So the post method is being used. So on the server side I have to receive it using the post method. So type in $_post, and the variable here is first name, big F and a big N. Now what is this dot? This is the concatenation operator. In Java you can concatenate strings with a plus sign, but in PHP you cannot concatenate strings with a plus sign, you have to use the dot. So over here I'm going to also concatenate another string to that, and that'll be for closing the paragraph. And a semicolon here. I'll copy this line again for the last name. Copy. And put last name here. And change this to last name too. So I can save now and see if this is going to work. So I start again with my contact info. Let me run this. Load it in here. Enter a name like Jimmy Smith. Okay, Smith. Click on submit, and there we go. The server responded by saying user entered first name Jimmy, last name Smith. So let's do something that will throw it off. Let's change this to get. Okay, so when I change this to get, on the server side I'm trying to extract it from the post array. So it's not going to work because since I'm sending it using the get method, I have to receive it using the get array. So let's see if it's going to work. What's going to happen now? So I'm going to run this. So I'll enter a name like Jane Bond here. Okay. Click on submit. What happens? The names are missing. Couldn't find it in that array. If I go back to process.php and I change the array to be the get array and I save, let's try it again. So I'll try the Thunderbolt again, and here we are. I'll use another name like Bob, let us say Fraser. Okay, click on submit, and now it's find Bob Fraser. Notice because I used the get method, the data is being passed on the URL line, which is not a good idea when you're dealing with forms. So it is much better for us to always use post when it comes to forms. And let's fix it at the back end. Make this the post auto global and post auto global here too. So this is the common way of transmitting data from the client to the server. I'm going to show you a shortcut for doing this. So I'll create another process here, a new file, and I'm going to call it process2.php. So process2 is going to, I made a mistake there, let's rename this. I made it HPH, it should be PHP. Okay, so here's my process PHP. Now there's a command in PHP that does some what we call auto magic. If you say extract $_post, what this does is it inspects all the items that are in that $_post, and it creates local variables with the names of those items in the array. In other words, so there is an item called first name. What it's going to do is going to create a local variable with a dollar before it so that it becomes easily accessible. What this means is that if I enter that command, let me copy this stuff here and repurpose it, and you'll see that it's much easier. So I'm going to paste this here. The user entered this. So instead of saying $post and so on, so now I have a variable that is just $first name. And I can use variable $last name. This becomes available to me simply because I said extract and create local variables. So let us save this. Let me go back to my info page. And instead of processing to process, I'm going to submit to process2.php. Let's save everything and then run it. So here for first name, let me enter, say, duty, say, white. Okay. If I click on submit, same end result. But it's a little bit easier, as you can see here. Process 2 has a little bit less code than process 1.